68%. That's the share of Roman emperors who died violently. Only 1 in 4 made it to a natural death. If those numbers crossed a modern herdesk, somebody would be in a very long meeting. So let's run Rome's personnel file like the performance review it deserves. 84 men held the title of emperor. Average tenure, 7.8 years, collapsing to barely 5 near the end. The most common exit method was a dagger, usually held by someone on the imperial payroll. One ruler was poisoned at dinner with a plate of mushrooms. When that didn't finish the job, his own physician administered the antidote with a feather dipped in toxin. Another emperor's position was literally auctioned off to soldiers on the palace walls, highest bidder wins, going once, going twice. And one was stabbed to death on a dirt road while he'd stopped to relieve himself. The plot conveniently organized by the man who stepped into his job the next morning. These were the most powerful people on Earth. Welcome to Dumb Ages, and welcome to their performance review. We are going to move fast. There are 84 of these men, and almost none of them made it easy. Let's meet the employees. Before we get to the official staff, we need to talk about the guy who wrote the job description. Julius Caesar wasn't technically an emperor, but he built the template every emperor would then spend 500 years failing to escape. On the 15th of March, 44 BC Nis, the Ides of March, Caesar walked into a meeting at the theater of Pompey and was stabbed 23 times by a conspiracy of senators. 23. That is not an assassination, that is a group project where everyone actually contributed. And no, he did not say et tu, Brute? That line is fictional. Shakespeare made it up over 1600 years later. What Caesar actually established was the real motto of the Roman Empire. The greatest threat to your life is the people standing closest to you. Keep that in mind, because it's about to come up. A lot. Enter Augustus, Rome's first official emperor, and statistically, the single luckiest man on this entire list. On the 19th of August, 14 AD, Augustus died peacefully in his bed in Nola, near Naples, at the ripe old age of 75. Peacefully. In bed. Of being old. According to Suetonius, his last words were a quote from a Greek comedy, "Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit." A theater reference. Charming. Dignified. A graceful bow at the end of a long career. Savor that, because it is the last time anyone on this list gets to exit on their own terms for a while. Augustus is our proof that natural death was technically possible. He is one data point. Note what happens to literally everyone who follows him. His successor, Tiberius, made it to nearly 78, which sounds like a win until you read the fine print. Tiberius fell ill, seemed to be dying, and then, awkwardly, started to recover. This was inconvenient for everyone who had already emotionally moved on. So the ancient sources, and they don't fully agree here, suggest that the Praetorian prefect Macro, possibly with a young man named Caligula, solved the recovery problem by smothering the old man with his own bedclothes. When word spread that Tiberius was dead, the citizens of Rome did not observe a respectful silence. They ran through the streets chanting, "Into the Tiber with Tiberius," a rhyming send-off. He was not beloved. And the young man possibly holding the pillow? That was our next emperor. Caligula. Caligula's reign is a whole other video, but his ending is instructive. He had a Praetorian tribune named Cassius Chaerea, a loyal officer whom Caligula mocked constantly, specifically for having a high-pitched voice. He teased the armed soldier, the armed, trained soldier, about his voice, repeatedly. On the 24th of January, 41 AD, in an underground corridor beneath the Palatine Theater, Cassius Chaerea got the last word. He struck first, slicing the emperor's neck. Then roughly 30 more stab wounds followed from the others. And in a detail that tells you everything about the imperial family business model, on that same day the conspirators also murdered Caligula's wife, Caesonia, and his infant daughter, Julia Drusilla. Management wanted a clean transition. Which brings us to Claudius and the feather. Buckle up. Claudius was married to Agrippina, who had ambitions for her own son and had decided Claudius was in the way. So, On the 13th of October, 54 AD, according to Tacitus, she hired a professional. Locusta was a poisoner, an actual working professional in the field of poisoning people, which tells you the Roman job market had some specialized roles. Locusta laced Claudius's mushrooms, but the dose wasn't strong enough. Claudius didn't die. He just felt terrible. So the court physician, Xenophon, stepped in to help ostensibly to make the emperor vomit and feel better. He tickled the back of Claudius's throat with a feather that had been dipped in poison. The man's own doctor finished the job with the world's most elegant murder weapon. Now, historians debate whether this literally happened, but some details are too good to leave out, and a poison feather administered by your personal physician is one of them. Agrippina's son, by the way, was Nero. Nero's reign ended with a masterclass in self-importance. By June of 68 AD, the Senate had declared him a public enemy, which in Roman terms was a very strong hint. He fled to a villa 4 miles outside Rome belonging to a freedman named Phaon. And there, cornered, Nero decided to take his own life dramatically. There was just one problem. He couldn't do it. He could not bring himself to drive the dagger into his own throat. He needed his secretary, Epaphroditus, to physically guide the blade. And his final words, the last thing this man said on earth, were, "Qualis artifex perio." What an artist dies in me. He was 30 years old, being helped to stab himself, and his main concern was that the art world was losing a giant. Incredible commitment to the brand. Now, if you thought that was a chaotic transition, hold on, because the company is about to enter what we in HR call a restructuring. The year 69 AD. The year of the 4 emperors. This is the speed round. Emperor number 1, Galba, murdered in the Roman Forum on the 15th of January. Now, Galba was bald, which created a logistical challenge for his killer, because you traditionally carry a severed head by the hair. No hair. So the assassin improvised. He hid the head inside his cloak, and to carry it, he stuck his thumb into the dead emperor's mouth. It was later paraded through the army camp on a pole. First quarter, off to a rough start. Emperor number 2, Otho. Otho actually comes out of this looking good, which is rare. After his forces lost the Battle of Bedriacum, he decided that continuing the civil war would just get more Romans killed. So on the 16th of April, he stabbed himself in the heart to end the conflict. Ancient writers considered this genuinely noble a redemptive death. One dignified exit in the whole speed round. We'll take it. Emperor number 3, Vitellius. Vitellius does not get a dignified exit. He was dragged out of hiding, paraded down the Via Sacra in torn clothes while crowds jeered, then pushed down the Gemonian stairs and killed. His reported final words were, "Yet I was once your emperor." Then his body was dragged along by hooks and thrown into the Tiber, which, at this point, was less a river and more the official employee disposal system. Emperor number 4, Vespasian. And Vespasian survived. He founded the Flavian dynasty, and, crucially, he died of natural causes, an intestinal disorder, in Rieti on the 23rd of June, 79 AD. It was, medically speaking, a severe and undignified case of diarrhea. But even that couldn't kill his sense of humor. Romans had a tradition of declaring dead emperors to be gods. So as he lay dying, Vespasian's self-mocking last words were, "Alas, I think I am becoming a god." Deadpan to the very end. Best exit interview on the list. His son Titus inherited the throne. And here's the cruel part. Titus ruled barely 2 years, the same 2 years that saw Mount Vesuvius bury Pompeii. And then, on the 13th of September, 81 AD, Titus died of a fever, aged just 41, in the exact same villa in Rieti where his father had died 2 years earlier. Same house. Same family. 2 dead emperors. Somebody should have checked the plumbing. Next up, Domitian. And this one is my favorite, because it's about an astrologer who was extremely good at his job. Domitian was told by an astrologer the precise hour of his own death. Naturally, he was terrified as the day approached. So a conspirator did something clever. He falsified the palace clocks, telling Domitian the fatal hour had already passed. Relieved, the emperor relaxed. That's when a servant named Stephanus handed him a letter supposedly detailing a plot against him. Domitian started reading. Stephanus stabbed him with a blade hidden in the bandages on his arm. The plot in the letter was real. It was that one. And the astrologer subplot pays off too. Domitian had a court astrologer, Asculterio, who predicted he himself would be torn apart by dogs. Domitian, annoyed, had him executed 9x specifically to prove the prediction wrong, ordering the body carefully cremated. But at the funeral, a sudden gale scattered the pyre, and dogs found the half-burned corpse and mangled it. The astrologers went 2 for 2. Never bet against a Roman astrologer with a specific claim. Let's jump ahead to Commodus, the emperor obsessed with being Hercules, who liked to fight in the arena as a gladiator. His death, on the 31st of December 192 AD, required 3 separate attempts, because Commodus was extremely difficult to kill. Attempt 1. His concubine, Marcia, poisoned his wine. But Commodus was very drunk, and drunk people vomit, so he just threw the poison right back up. Problem. So the conspirators went to plan B, which was to send in Narcissus Ninus, his own wrestling trainer, who strangled the emperor to death in his bath. Poisoned, vomited, then strangled by his personal trainer. That is the most on-brand death for a man obsessed with being a strong man that I can possibly imagine. Killing Commodus, however, created a vacancy, and this is where the company completely loses control of its own hiring process. The new emperor was Pertinax, a sensible administrator who lasted less than 3 months. On the 28th of March 193 AD, roughly 300 Praetorian guards Bice Nelas, the emperor's own bodyguards, stormed the palace and killed him. Per Cassius Dio, his head was cut off and paraded on a spear. And then the Praetorian Guard did something so audacious it's almost impressive. They auctioned off the Roman Empire. Literally. An open auction from the palace walls for the most powerful position in the known world. A wealthy senator named Didius Julianus won by bidding 25,000 sestertii per soldier, shouting down a rival who'd offered 20,000. He bought the throne. He purchased the entire Roman Empire like it was a used chariot. He got 66 days. On the 2nd of June 193 AD, Didius Julianus was killed in the palace, having learned that buying a company does not mean the staff respect you. His plaintive final words were, "But what evil have I done? Whom have I killed?" Which, to be fair, was a good question. His actual crime was overpaying. Now let's talk about the worst brothers in history, Geta and Caracalla. Their father left them the empire to rule together, which was a bit like leaving a single sandwich to 2 starving wolves. It did not go well. On the 26th of December 211 AD, Caracalla had centurions kill Geta, and Geta died in the arms of their own mother, Julia Domna, who was wounded in the hand by a sword trying to shield her son. And then Caracalla, to be thorough, had roughly 20,000 of Geta's associates, supporters, and staff killed in the purge that followed. 20,000. He didn't just win the argument, he deleted everyone who'd ever been in the room. But remember the founding motto, "The danger is always closest to you." On the 8th of April 217 AD, Caracalla was traveling from Edessa toward Carrhae when he stopped by the roadside to urinate. And while he stood there, at his most powerful and least dignified, a soldier named Julius Marcialis stabbed him. Marcialis was immediately cut down by a bodyguard minus, which was very convenient, because a dead assassin can't testify. And it turned out the plot's true organizer was the Praetorian prefect Macrinus, who then became emperor. The man who investigated the murder was the man who ordered it. Killed mid-urination by a subordinate on behalf of the guy who got promoted. Caesar's template, perfected. And here is where things truly fall apart. Starting around 235 AD, Rome entered the crisis of the 3rd century, a 50-year stretch where the deaths come so fast the names blur into one long scream, but 3 of them earned individual recognition. Take Decius. In 251 AD, Decius claimed a grim distinction, the first Roman emperor killed in battle by a foreign enemy. At the Battle of Abritus, fighting the Goths, He was reportedly cut down in a swamp Ninesis, and his body was never recovered. The most powerful man in the world, lost in a marsh. No head on a spear, no funeral pyre, just gone into the mud. Then there's Gordian III, who died on campaign against Persia around 244 AD. The official story was a tragic accident. The trouble is that the man who reported the tragedy, investigated the tragedy, and then conveniently became the next emperor was Gordian's own general, Philip the Arab. Philip even sent a warm, sympathetic letter back to Rome about what a terrible loss it all was. If that sounds familiar, it should. That is Caesar's template with better paperwork. And then, the crown jewel of imperial indignity, Valerian. In 260 AD, Valerian was captured alive by the Persian king Shapur I, the only Roman emperor ever taken prisoner by a foreign power. And Shapur, according to Roman accounts, did not ransom him or execute him. He kept him. The story goes that Shapur used the captured emperor as a human footstool, stepping on Valerian's back to climb onto his horse. And when Valerian finally died, Shapur reportedly had him skinned, stuffed, and put on display as a trophy. That is not a metaphor. The most powerful man in the Roman world ended his career as furniture, and then as taxidermy. And those are just the memorable ones. The average reign, which had begun at 7.8 years, collapsed to 6.1. Of every violent death across the empire, 79% were assassinations, overwhelmingly by sword or dagger, delivered by Rome's own soldiers and officers. Combat with a foreign enemy, like Decius in his swamp, accounts for only about 12%. The machine mostly ate its own emperor, assassination. Next emperor, assassination, on repeat for the better part of 50 years. Rome had turned regicide into a standard operating procedure. And then, finally, in 476 AD, the Western Empire ran out of runway altogether, and its very last emperor got the strangest ending on the whole list. Romulus Augustulus, a teenager who barely counts, was simply deposed and packed off to retire in a comfortable villa. Not stabbed. Not poisoned, not thrown in the Tiber. After 500 years of daggers, the Roman Empire in the West ended not with a murder, but with an early retirement package, which, given everything you've just heard, might genuinely be the happiest ending anyone on this list got. So let's close the file. Which brings us back to Augustus, the one man who got the peaceful ending. Remember his last words, the ones he borrowed from a comedy, "Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit." For Augustus, it was a graceful bow. For everyone who came after him, it turned out to be the darkest joke in Roman history minus, because the audience wasn't clapping, they were reaching for a dagger. And the show, as the numbers prove, was always a tragedy. That's the end of the personnel file. If you enjoyed this grim little audit, you know what to do minus, and we'll see you next time, here at Dumb Ages.